Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Building Better Communities Youth Civic Engagement and After School Programs webinar. We're starting right now at 2 p.m. I'd like to introduce or have our speakers introduce themselves. And I will start off with, next slide, please. Oh, sorry. The housekeeping. We have housekeeping notes. This webinar is being live streamed and will be recorded. We will share a link to the recording and all resources after the presentation. If you have a comment or a question, please use the chat function and set it to everyone in order to interact with our presenters, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. I'd like to take a moment to have our next slide, our speakers introduce themselves.
Thanks, Sean, and hi, everyone. My name is Anita Krishnamurthy, and I work at the Afterschool Alliance along with Sean and our other colleagues who are on this webinar at the Alliance. I oversee our federal STEM efforts and our youth civic engagement work, and I want to add my welcome to you all for our conversation today about how we can support young people to engage in their communities and be part of an intergenerational approach to tackling issues that bother them. My personal belief, which I think most of you share because you're here and we had an enormous amount of interest in this webinar, is that our role as adults is not to simply prepare young people to take their place in a broken system, but rather it is to support them to think critically about what isn't working well and why, and what role they can play in improving it in small ways as well as at a systemic level. And this is what we mean when we talk about youth civic engagement today. I think we can all agree that this work requires a combination of empathy and critical thinking and technical knowledge, among other skills, all things we work on nurturing in after-school programs. So you'll hear today from three colleagues I've had the privilege of working with for a few years now, who represent different perspectives on youth civic engagement. I am so happy that they were able to make time to join us today and share their expertise with us. So before I go further, I'd like to ask them to briefly introduce themselves. And James, let's start with you.
All right, peace everyone. My name is James Fields. I am a MICFA alumni and also the Senior Director of Youth Councils at MICFA Challenge. I'll toss it to Luella.
Hello, I'm Luella Provenza, and I am the U.S. Partnership Specialist with Technovation, and I will toss it over to Nuria.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Nuria Hayat. I am a senior researcher with Circle, which is a research center at Tufts University.
Amazing. Next slide, please. So why are we talking about civic engagement at a time when so much of the talk is focused on workforce development, especially in STEM and especially these days? We will make the case today that they're not mutually exclusive. Research on civic engagement efforts shows that it has many of the same outcomes as participation in high quality after-school programs broadly, and also helps to develop critical thinkers with good workforce skills, which is something we say about the impact of STEM programs as well. And Nuria will talk about this a little bit more when she speaks. We know that for a society to work well, we need people to be engaged in their communities and to understand which levers of influence to pull to meet their needs. And given how much of a STEM-driven world we live in today, it's hard to see how we can understand and shape the world around us without some degree of STEM literacy and proficiency. And I would go so far as to say that being literate in today's world has to include STEM literacy. And I strongly believe that there are dual and equally important goals for nurturing STEM literacy and proficiency in young people, which is to prepare them to be engaged citizens who understand the science behind what is happening around them, and to be knowledgeable enough to participate effectively in the modern workforce. And this idea is encapsulated in this quote you see on the screen from a young woman who participated in a program supported by Technovation. And when Luella speaks, you'll hear much more about the evaluation results, but I'm always impressed that their results show that their alums remain highly engaged in their communities as adults and also join the STEM workforce in higher numbers, proving the point that they're not mutually exclusive. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about our work at the Afterschool Alliance to try and thread this needle with our CS initiative. Next slide, please. So CS stands for the Collective for Youth Empowerment in STEM and Society, which is a long name, and so we call it CS. And our philosophy is reflected in our name. We are a collective of programs. We don't run programs. There are so many of you out there doing this amazing work already. Our main goal is to make sure you don't feel like you're alone and provide the supports you may need to do the work, and to support you if you're not already doing this work but want to start doing this kind of work. And our 3 strands of work are focused on community building among those already doing this work, capacity building for other programs who want to do this work, and research and advocacy to gather data on outcomes and normalize this type of youth engagement work. We want to support more programs to do more and do better so that all youth have access to programs where they can apply their range of interests, skills, and knowledge to improve their local communities. Next slide, please. So we know the common saying, talent is everywhere, but opportunities are not. And this is as true for civic engagement as it is for STEM or after school. You'll hear more about this from Nuria in a bit, who'll talk about the idea of civic deserts, just like we talk about after school deserts or STEM deserts. We launched the CS effort at the Afterschool Alliance 2 years ago, recognizing that after-school programs were really beginning to focus on youth voice initiatives. And we also knew that STEM has become widespread in after-school programs. And of course, we knew that many after-school programs have been doing great work for many, many years on supporting youth to be civically engaged in their communities. Now, I'm a STEM professional, and I moved from academic research in astronomy to after-school work because I see its intersection with social mobility and social justice. And I strongly believe that STEM fields not only strongly influence society, but in turn must be influenced by society's needs. So we wanted to look at what the intersection of STEM and youth leadership and civic engagement looked like. And I found that there were many programs working at this intersection of youth leadership, civic engagement, and STEM, but they didn't necessarily know about each other. And hence the idea of CS was born, which aims to bring people together at the intersection of these 3 ideas so that we can leverage the enormous momentum behind STEM, the momentum behind youth voice, and the separate momentum that is building behind civic education and civic engagement, as they actually share many common design elements, goals, and outcomes. Next slide, please. We know that many people are brimming with energy and ideas for how to make things better in the world around them, but they need support to act on those ideas. A lucky few receive that support and mentoring, but most don't. And after-school programs with our focus on positive youth development are a great space to do this work. But like anything, learning how to engage civically needs mentoring and it needs practice. We need to experiment with it, starting small and building up the muscles to do this type of work. And what better place to do it in after-school programs where we place a real value on youth voice and choice. And you'll hear an example from James when he speaks about how MICWA does this so well and approaches this. Next slide, please. At the same time, we know that opportunities to engage with STEM and after school have really exploded over the past 15 years. We also know that there are fewer after-school programs for teens, and we know we struggle to recruit and retain teens and older youth in programs. So we think that co-developing or supporting youth-led and community-centered programs can be a great way to engage teens in ways that feel meaningful and purposeful and make the learning feel relevant. And as I said before, STEM fields now underpin and drive most of modern society. There are some efforts to engage the adult public in discussions about STEM-based issues that will have huge implications for society and our lives. But there aren't as many of these kinds of conversations that engage young people, especially not teens, in these discussions on issues that they have to deal with now and for longer in the future. And you'll hear from Luella about how Technovation has been making the connections between STEM and society for young people for nearly 20 years now. Next slide, please. So as I said at the beginning, CS is not in the business of running programs, but rather we see our role as being to support and connect the programs who are already doing this work or want to do this work. I really believe that we can do so much more together than we can alone, and especially in this time of shrinking budgets, joining forces and leveraging existing resources and expertise will be absolutely critical. And I know we all believe that young people are not just the future, they are the here and now. They're experiencing life in the present moment, and we owe it to them to engage them in meaningful ways to help shape the society we and they want to live in. So next slide. And speaking of leveraging resources, we've compiled many on our website. This screen just shows you screenshots of many of the pages on our website. There are program blogs that can serve as examples to inspire you about the work that's already going on. We have a community of expert practitioners who have a lot of experience to share with you, a resource database that points you at the myriad resources that are already out there, offering you PD and curriculum and research. We have a funding database and messaging tips on how to write proposals, and we know everyone needs money to do their work. We also just released some video professional development modules on authentic youth voice if you're just getting started. So next slide, please. And we are releasing our very latest resources today, a civic engagement report that explores the landscape of the current climate and opportunities for youth civic engagement, so you can learn more and make the case for doing this work. And all three of our speakers have contributed in big ways to this report. And a practitioner's toolkit if you want to take the plunge and do this work. Helps you make sense of the terms that people use in this field, find the curricula, tools, and other resources that can help get you on your way. So next slide, please. So I'm going to end my piece now by pointing you at ways you can stay connected with us, our website, and we have an active presence on LinkedIn where you can learn about all the work that we're doing and resources we're pointing people at. And I'm now going to hand you off to Nuria, who'll talk about some of the research around youth civic engagement. So Nuria, I'll hand it off to you. And next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Anita. Good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited to share out some of the research that went into this report. My name is Nuria Hayat. I am a senior researcher with Circle. On the next slide, you'll see that this was Circle is the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. We are a nonpartisan research center that focuses on youth civic engagement, broadly speaking. We are housed at Tisch College of Civic Life at Tufts University. And we focus mainly on what are the systemic levers that affect youth civic engagement. Next slide, please. So we've been doing research on youth civic engagement and the levers that affect youth civic engagement, particularly K-12 civics and youth electoral participation for over 2 decades. My interest is a lot in K-12 civic education and civic learning. And as Anita said, to kind of join forces now to see how civic learning doesn't just happen in schools, but what are all the levers that affect civic learning and then civic engagement as well. Next slide, please. So you will see in both the report that Anita mentioned and also throughout some of the slides that I'm going to be sharing, that we're making connections between youth civic engagement, civic learning, and civic education that happens in a variety of settings. But first, what are we talking about when we're saying civic engagement? Simply put, that is individual or collective action to solve problems of public concern. And so youth civic engagement is young people individually or collectively coming together to solve problems. And you will see so many examples that both James and Luella will share of young people doing that all over the world. So civic education and civic learning is then what are the skills, the knowledge, the attitudes or dispositions young people need to be civically engaged, to be active and agentic young people. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, there are many levers that affect youth civic engagement, and some of the most important ones are civic learning, particularly in schools, but also out of schools, in community, in in the culture that surrounds them with peer influence. How do young people develop their civic identity and socialization? What is the political climate in which they're growing up in? So all of that affects civic engagement. My focus today is to kind of make the connection between civic learning in what happens in schools from what we know in our research, and how do we bridge that gap with after schools and in community learning as well. So next slide, please. So let's look at some metrics for youth civic engagement. There are many ways to look at it. One metric is to look at young people's electoral engagement. That's one tiny metric of all the ways that young people are involved in both, political activities like casting a ballot, but also non-political activities like volunteering or donating money or, signing petitions. But this is one metric where we can kind of show you a trend. So this is a trend of youth voter turnout in the past presidential election cycles. And as you can see, there's been an upward trend, particularly in the last 2 to 3 election cycles, and it peaked in 2020. We did see a dip in 2024 election cycle, but generally the trend has been upward for youth voter turnout. Next slide, please. So even with an upward tick toward of youth voter turnout, it masks deep inequities in access. And this is one example of how access to education, for instance, affects youth voter turnout. In the past 5 decades, you can see that those young people who have a college degree and young people who do not have a high school, the difference is large and has been persistent over time. So there are deep inequities in access, and if schools are the only place where young people get access to civic learning, a lot of young people miss out. So we need more access points. Next slide, please. So one of the research that Anita mentioned before is that we saw in 2016, our research showed that about 2 in 3 young people from rural areas and about 1 in 3 young people in urban or suburban areas live in what we call a civic desert, which is essentially a place with one or no access to civic institutions aside from maybe their schools, where they get opportunities for access to learn about civic learning and engagement. In our last year, or in 2023, actually, we saw that about a third of youth who were living in rural areas and a little more than a third who were living in urban areas said that they had access to either organizations or people or resources that can help them make sense and meaning of their environment, the social and political information they were getting. So a large swath of young people do not have access, and schools are one point of access and a great point, but they alone cannot do all of this. And after school spaces are one of the great ways where we can bridge the civic access gap for youth, particularly youth living in civic deserts. And you'll hear all the connections between access through schools, after schools, through programs, through communities, through this webinar, and particularly in the report as well. Next slide, please. So our recent research to focus on schools in general, and particularly high schools as young people are aging into the electorate, showed that less than 2 in 5 or less young people had any meaningful student voice experience in high school. And this was even less for young people, particularly Asian and Black youth. So a lot of young people are looking for spaces where they have experiences to engage, to use their voice and feel like their opinion and their voice mattered. And after school spaces, again, are one of the great ways that this can happen. Next slide. In addition, we also saw in our recent research that only 1 in 3 young people reported that they had any meaningful input in decision making. And a lot of youth-led initiatives and programs that in the report, and James and Luella will also talk about this, help young people develop that voice, develop that input and decision making that a lot of young people may not be getting through school and school initiatives. Next slide, please. So, so civic learning is one of the most powerful levers for youth civic engagement, and after-school programs and environments provide a rich environment for young people to develop those civic skills and dispositions for young people. To go back to our first slide where we were talking about the benefits of youth civic engagement. They're directly not just linked for benefits for young people. So, young people's civic identity, understanding and how to make sense of the world around them, solving problems together, but it also affects academic success, career readiness, and a lot of skills that are needed in the world today. And it has a lot of community benefits. So a lot of programs that you'll see the next two speakers talk about actually has a lot of local and global community benefits and change that young people lead. Next slide, please. So developing lifelong and agentic young people requires an ecosystem approach. And many times the focus of civic education is usually just either in the social studies classroom or in schools. And a holistic approach that builds civic awareness in schools through multiple pathways, not just schools, but communities, community organizations, and especially today we're talking about the connection that after-school spaces can provide through programs, through young people, particularly in civic deserts, that can help them have different access to civic learning and engagement. I will pass it over to James now. Take it over from here. Thank you.
Thanks. Peace again, everyone. My name is James Fields. And I'm going to tell you all a little bit about MICFA Challenge. So what is MICFA Challenge exactly? MICFA Challenge is a national nonpartisan civic education organization that equips young people with the knowledge and hands-on experience they need to become empowered, informed, and active citizens and community members to help actually save our democracy. All right. So we can go to the next slide. So our mission is to develop young people to be empowered, informed, active, and engage community members and citizens who will promote a just and equitable society. We can move to the next slide. Here are our values. These values guide all of the things that we do, and we make sure that, not only our staff honor them, but our community partners and our young people. So we value youth voice, civic education. We value community. We value reflection and growth, which is my favorite. And we also value equitable inclusion, right? We can go to the next slide. So specifically, some of the programs that we offer are a variety of programs, but I'll just specifically highlight our MICFA Challenge Citywide Youth Council, which I am currently a part of and lead. Some of the other programs that we actually worked on outside of our Citywide Youth Council is our election and campaign experience. So that's a youth organizing academy that we have where we specifically are engaging in high school students to come in and learn about community organizing and organizing in elections. And then we also have an amazing program called the MICFA Summer Fellows. Our MICFA Summer Fellows specifically places all of our MICFA participants in elected officials' office in the summertime. So any graduating high school senior or any returning first year college student would be able to actually apply and participate in MICFA Summer Fellows. And then we also have another program called Project Soapbox, which young people of all ages get to be able to talk about an issue that is really important to them, come up with some solutions, and have a call to action. And then our classroom work. I wouldn't be here today as a MICFA alum without our classroom work. Our chief strategy officer is Jill Bass, and she was my MICFA teacher when I was in high school. So we specifically, are really intentional about pouring into educators and into young people because we know that majority of our young people spend the most time in schools. So thinking about all of our program, why our Citywide Youth Council is so important. We only have two chapter sites, one in DC and one in Chicago. And both of those chapter sites have what we call Citywide Youth Councils, which is to make sure that our young people in high school, right, anywhere from a high school sophomore to a high school senior, gets to be able to actually come together and put together the formation and implementation and evaluation of public policy at the city level. So our young people are actually, creating policy recommendations, doing researches, and most importantly, what I love the most is they get to the root causes of the issue. So every single young person in our citywide youth council knows how to utilize a root cause analysis. They utilize that to unpack complex issues, some of the issues that we specifically face, some of the issues that they face, and majority of those issues that they talk about is education and safety and justice. So we have two citywide youth councils. One is our student advisory council, and then one is our safety and justice council. Those councils talk to local decision makers, right? So you would ask, like, what is a decision maker? A decision maker is an individual who's actually going to be able to control what it is that young people want to be able to implement on a policy level. So for our student advisory council, that looks like working directly with Chicago Public Schools CEO. With our safety and justice council, that looks like working directly with our Cook County Board President, Tony Preckwinkle. Right. And these young people, not only do they get to work with these adults, but these adults get to hear their story. These adults get to see their research. These adults get to be able to uplift their lived experience and their voice within their sector, right, of whatever it is, or whether that's safety and justice or whether that is education. And we service about probably annually with the young people on our citywide youth council somewhere between 110 a year. We usually have cohorts about 20 young people. They'll come after school weekly where they're getting a stipend because we believe that we have to pay them for their expertise, where they're getting a hot meal, and they also get to be able to build out these relationships, not only with a trusted adult who leads them through this process, but they actually get to connect with their peers. Another thing is it's youth led, right? It's youth led and it's youth driven. So when we think about the high arch ladder of participation, we want to be at the very top, which means that this work is going to take a little bit longer because our young people have a certain schedule and different responsibilities. But what that means is we want them to be able to lead session, right? Come in a session, lead a check-in. We want them to also be able to figure out what are some of the pressing issues and trends that are happening locally that you all feel like you want to be able to tackle. So that's just like sort of like an overview of what our MIC Challenge Citywide Youth Councils program is and what it does and how it operates. So it's out of school time program. We meet weekly. Young people get paid an actual employment rate of 16.80 an hour, which is amazing. So it's not just a stipend, but we're actually like employing them. We can move to the next slide. I think that it's important that when you do youth work, you never, ever, ever enter in a space without bringing your young people. So today, with me knowing that young people could not, because they're currently in school and they just started school a couple of weeks ago, come, I just wanted to be able to share this with you all. Some of these are quotes directly from a cohort of young people that I had the privilege and honor of working with this year. And I tell my young people, every single time you share your story or your expertise, you're carrying your family, you're carrying your community members, you're carrying the people that you love in all of those spaces. So today I'm carrying all of them in here with me. And we can go to the next slide. And when you do this work, it's really important that you ground and you center their voice, that you ground and you center their expertise. I love everything that we do at MICFA because our values of youth voice guides how we operate and guides how we create these safe spaces for our young people to be able to share their voice and to share their expertise and to share solutions, right? And really build out adult and youth partnerships, right? So that we can actually make sure that when policymakers are creating these policies, they actually did hear from young people because it's impacting them directly, and their time is always now. It's not in the future. So I want to now toss it over to Luella.
Thanks so much, James. Hey, y'all. Like I said earlier, I am the U.S. Partnership Specialist with Technovation. And our mission is to empower girls to become social entrepreneurs and use technology to solve real world problems. We collaborate with schools and community partners like the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, like many of you on this webinar today, to provide youth with the tools and the skills to tackle issues in their own community. And so what you have in front of you right now is kind of our season impact numbers. This past year, we had about 11,000 girls create kind of tech-based solutions that address challenges from climate change to youth mental health to accessibility to high-quality education. If you can go to the next slide. And so through our program, youth with little to no coding or AI expertise are creating smarter cities and kinder communities. And so these are just a few examples of many that we have from across the globe. But today, I'm particularly sharing one that I always like to share, and that is OraPal. And so this solution was generated based on that direct experience of young people dealing with their grandparents suffering from dementia. And so they decided to leverage kind of their cultural art of origami, teaching seniors in a virtual setting, keeping their minds active and sharp while also combating social isolation. And so again, this is one of many solutions that range from improving quality of life to dealing with disaster response to, again, quality education. But one thing is common among all of the solutions that are built by our young people, and that is that it's rooted in their life experience and what is relevant and meaningful to them. And so they are driving kind of their learning process and that creation process. And so one of the things that I like to kind of emphasize is that while youth are having an impact on their community and the world, Technovation strives to have an impact on the young people in our program. So if you can go to the next slide, this will kind of explore the various kind of future-ready skills that young people are walking away with designing solutions with technology. And what you'll see is that it goes above and beyond just coding and that technology piece. And it really is rooted in entrepreneurship, project management and planning, ethics, right? And some really essential skills like communication and teamwork and what have you. And so in addition to kind of the statistics that you see on the screen in front of you, you know, through our program, 82% of our young people feel like they have a sense of belonging in STEM, but they're also 93% of them feel like they are equipped to kind of take on and achieve their goals. And specifically through the creation of kind of app and tech-based solutions, they're feeling as though this experience is impacting kind of their career choices. And so we're seeing about 70% of our alumni go into STEM-based programs and career pathways, but more importantly, about 43% of our young people in this past year, right, from alumni and our surveys, are staying active in their community, while 66% of them are staying active in kind of in their school-based community. And so for us, again, this goes beyond kind of that coding and that artificial intelligence, but really showing them how they can stay connected and be civically engaged in their community through technology. And so if you want to go to the next slide for me, please. One of the things that Technovation really tries to do is ensure that that access point is at the heart of what we do. So Nuria talked about improving kind of that points of access for young people to be civically engaged. And so the way that we go about that is really through the essence of collaboration. And so we really work with educators, schools, community partners like the YMCA and Boys and Girls Club to kind of bring this program down to young people between the ages of 8 and 18. And through this collaborative model, we're providing kind of training differentiated curriculum and ongoing support, right, to bring kind of that tech entrepreneurship to young people. And so they formulate teams that are guided by mentors to help choose and identify kind of that problem and work to develop kind of that tech-based solution, and then go into pitching that idea in our kind of our global competition. And so what makes Technovation unique is kind of that backstop of support that we provide to our program partners along the way, but also coupled with that real world application of problem solving. And so it's about the process of design thinking and problem solving more so than it is about kind of learning kind of that tech skill. And so things that have stuck with me along the way over this year as I've gotten to know program and gotten to know our alumni is that folks are saying that this has taught them the process of how to learn. And recently something shared with by one of our alumni is that through this program, it's helped them create technology with heart. And so if you can go to the next slide, I just wanted to take a moment to invite all of you to kind of explore youth innovation that's been created around the world by young people. And so hopefully through kind of the various innovations that you see through our app gallery, you're inspired to collaborate with us to kind of create meaningful points of access for civic engagement for young people. And so with that, I turn it over back over to Anita.
Great. Thanks so much, Luella. Appreciate all the wonderful information that all our programs have shared. And I think that I see the chat's been really very active. So why don't we move on to a few questions? And I know that the team here has been monitoring the chat. So Sean, if you wouldn't mind just sort of looking over the questions, and I'll start with one that caught my eye. And this one is for you, James, is can you tell us about a youth-led policy win that the MICVA Challenge youth have had in recent years?
Okay. So one of the youth-led policy wins that we've had is specifically within Chicago Public Schools, they have LSCs, right? So they're local school councils. And what we were seeing was young people just didn't know what they were, right? And young people didn't know how they function. So what MICVA Student Advisory Council young people did was they met with the CEO, right? They asked the CEO like, hey, like, how can we assist you all with LSCs? And the CEO said, like, getting the word out there. So what young people did was a two-part. They implemented, right, one, a toolkit. So there's an LSC toolkit PDF that we can drop in the chat that and this is all youth led. So young people presented a recommendation to the CEO at the time, which was Pedro Martinez for Chicago Public Schools, and said, hey, we want to be able to implement youth voice within LSC, and we also want to be able to make sure that we launch a campaign. So what they did was put together a youth-led LSC toolkit, and then they created a PSA. So they created all these PSAs and these commercials, and they shared with them, right? So when the election came up for all of the local school council positions in Chicago, every single young person within the district was aware of what an LSC was and how an LSC operated. And MICVA young people spearheaded just making sure that it was accessible, making sure also that their voice was heard directly with the CEO, and making sure also that the LSC young people who were going to join knew what they were getting into, right? They knew, hey, when you have this meeting, we need to be able to have an agenda. We need to be able to have a check-in. So that's one example. The other example that young people did, they presented a recommendation to Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle. And this was tied directly to policy work that was being done in Cook County called the Cook County Policy Roadmap. And this policy roadmap is about healing-centered approaches and making sure that we are thinking about how some of these communities of color have been long disinvested and how do we actually invest in them, right? So young people's recommendation was we need to be able to have more youth-led peace circles so that young people can actually be able to be proactive with the perpetuation of violence within schools or within their communities, right? By saying like, hey, like let's train every single young person or every single educator on what restorative justice is. So they presented this recommendation to Tony Preckwinkle, which was we believe that Cook County should have youth-led peace circles throughout all of Cook County, and we believe that you should make it a mandate. And how they took action on that is that they actually had the president herself participate in a peace circle, which was the first time that she actually, as an elected official, had participated in a peace circle. And we did this in collaboration with other community-based organizations. So it wasn't just a MICFA thing. It was about making sure that every single young person who was a youth of Cook County actually had an opportunity to be able to connect with the president. And our numbers showed that 90% of our young people felt that their voice mattered and heard just because they were able to actually host a youth-led peace circle with President Preckwinkle. And I want to be able to highlight something that was really important that we reflected at MICFA about. One of our young people mentioned after that, they said this was the first time we've ever led something and adults wasn't in the space. So it was just young people and the president, right? And they talked about how much we showed them that we trust them, right? So we trusted them to be able to like actually hone this space and lead this space and ask those questions that may come at them. And it's been a phenomenal just world about of them actually presenting this recommendation to Tony Preckwinkle, having a youth-led peace circle with Tony Preckwinkle, along with also having youth-led peace circles with their peers, thinking about what's your civic identity and what's your civic footprint because the hope is for our young people to be able to be aware of those elected officials who have power within their neighborhoods and actually then be able to take action on saying, hey, we think that this peace circle should happen there, or we're experiencing this form of violence. We want to be able to sit down and talk to you. So those are two policy implementation wins, one being LSC with our local school council and developing a toolkit so more young people can be aware about that opportunity that CPS has. And then the other one was with our Cook County Board President and our Safety and Justice Council really spearheading youth-led peace circles to be able to come up with some different alternatives to detention to not lock young people up in the juvenile justice system. So those are the two policy wins I'll highlight.
That's
Great question.
amazing. Thank you so much, James. I'm always impressed every time I hear James talk. So Sean, I'll turn it over to you to see what other questions have come in.
Yeah, it's always amazing to hear like the power that youth have when they learn to like use their voices. I do have a question here from Noria. A participant was very intrigued to see the benefits of youth civic engagement on career readiness and workforce development. And can you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I think you saw already from the programs like that James and Luella showed, like even if they're in different settings, how being engaged young people develop so many skills. So youth civic engagement isn't just sometimes we hear of, oh, it's a nice to have, maybe that's something we will do. What is the benefit in workforce development? What is the benefit to community? And the skills, the dispositions, and the knowledge that young people gain through learning about civic engagement, through actually applying and doing this in real world settings, carries over. We see this well-documented research on linking youth civic engagement to better academic success, to better understanding of the world around them, and also developing or gaining skills that are for career readiness or for workforce. Yeah. I think it's linked into the report pretty well, so it goes over in detail. But yeah, there are well documented benefits of youth civic engagement, not just for the youth themselves, but for their, as we say, college, career, and civic life.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. And we'll put the link to the report in the chat so people can dig into it a little bit more as well.
Amazing. Luella, this question is for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about how programs can implement the Technovation programs and what do you need to get started?
Absolutely. Great question. So what you need to get started are youth that are interested and a place and space to meet. And every once in a while, access to technology to build, right? So the way that our program is structured is that we have curriculum that's available from grades 3rd through 5th grade, 6th through 8th, 9th through 12th. And depending on the grade bands, it will depend on how deep we go kind of in the content related to ideation, prototyping, coding, and all of that. And so really what we say is that you have to have a desire to learn alongside your youth. So a lot of our program partners have zero experience with coding and what have you. And so we really encourage them to learn alongside our young people. And it's okay to not have all of the knowledge or the assets, right, to code alongside with them. And it's okay to learn as you go. So what we do is provide that curriculum. In addition to that, we provide that professional development and ongoing support. So one of the things that we do is bring our program partners together for a community of practice to learn from one another. So that's another kind of place and space in which you learn and grow with the folks that are implementing technovation, not only in the United States, but across the globe. And so for us, if you are interested in collaborating and partnering with us, you can email me and I will drop my email in the chat. But what's great about our program is that everything is open access, completely free, because our goal is to ensure that no matter where a young person is between the ages of 8 and 18, that they have the ability to build something that they're passionate about and that can change their community. And so we do attempt to ensure that things are available for folks that may not have consistent access to technology, to where they can still ideate and prototype and get to a place and space where they can have impact on their community. So for us, we say that interest, that commitment from young people, and an ability to learn alongside with them. And then we will basically support you and train you on the rest.
Thank you so much. I think we might have time for maybe one more question, and this one is for kind of everyone on the panel. So as funding challenges arrive, like how are some, or what are some strategies and maybe shifts that your organizations have made? And maybe I'll start with James.
One of the things we've been really intentional about is the depth of our work, making sure that we have an opportunity to go deeper. Like there has been some funding challenges, but I think that what we've been really intentional around is that we collaborate with other organizations. And I remember just being on like a CYS call, and an organization was talking about, I mean, and then someone from philanthropy was talking about it's really important that non-for-profits partner together, because while we all are doing the work, there are certain things that like we do really, really great, right? So for us, we collaborate and we partner together with other organizations because we'll have a better opportunity to be able to kind of get that grant funding or funds if we're together versus competing, right? So just making sure that like we're in alignment with different organizations, whether that is, signing an MOU together and being able to figure out how are we going to leverage both of our resources to be able to do this work, or either applying for our RFP together has been some of our strategies. And what we also have done is like double down on who's been our supporters and ask them that like, hey, in this time right now, we really need you to be able to support us. So that's what I have for that one.
Amazing. Luella, same question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a program that has historically kept all of our curriculum and support for free, it's something that we continue to kind of keep our eye on, right? And want to ensure that no matter what we do, it's available to folks for free. And so I think collaboration is at the heart of that. But then also ensuring that we're capturing kind of the voices and the impact that our young people are having, so that we can put that front and center to funders to show that we don't have to wait for our young people to turn 24, 50, 60, right, to have an impact in their community. They can have it as early as 8 years old. And so I do think between that and collaborating, I think helps funders find why this is so important to folks. But then lastly, I think the other thing that we really do, again, related to the support structure, to our partners, we also have kind of a fundraising toolkit for our partners, right? And we provide kind of the language to talk about technovation, and data points, right, that can best serve them to fundraise locally, right, in order to ensure that our partnership can move further and farther in their community. And then I think the other piece as a U.S. partnership specialist is, growing our footprint so that we have a multitude of programs in a city and not just one or two. And I think, again, that power in having a multitude of collaborations, running technovation in a city, helps us show the impact that young people can have when you put technology kind of in their hands and ask them to solve some of the biggest problems that they're faced with. So that's what I would say. Collaboration, helping folks fundraise, using some of the tools that we have available to them is how we've kind of gotten through some of the challenges we've had recently with fundraising.
Amazing. Okay, so that took just a little less time than I thought. So I'm going to sneak in one more. And that would be, to anyone, can you help distinguish and compare the distinction between civic engagement and public or community service / philanthropy, both in metrics, the definition, like that youth engagement, and the metrics that measure long-term impact, recognizing their interrelated, sorry.
Might be a good one for you, Nuria, to kick us off.
Yeah, and it's loaded. So yes, they are interrelated, right? So if you go by the broad definition of like civic engagement, of the range of actions and behaviors that improve public problems and solve problems in communities, then what was the term, like public service, philanthropy, community service, all of those would be encompassed. So, civic engagement would be the broader term that would look at both the political participation, but also non-political participation that would include all of this. And because of the ways, especially as you saw the diverse examples that both James and Luella shared, civic engagement is going to mean different things to different people, particularly when it comes to young people, right? And the varied context in which they live, not just locally, but also globally, means different things. But generally, if it is people looking at a problem of public concern, then and how do they come together to solve it? And particularly, how do young people come together to solve this? On the question of metrics, so there's so many ways to then, if in your context, if it's programs and youth voice involved, how are young people then engaged? That would be one metric. One metric I showed you was electoral participation and casting a ballot. Do young people actually come out and participate? So there's not one capture-all metric for youth civic engagement or civic engagement in general, but I think depending on the context or what's happening, you can look at it from that angle. I know that's a broad answer, but I would love for someone else to jump in and answer too.
I think that's a big question, and I don't know if James or Luella wants to jump in, and it's okay if you don't.
Well, I think, I guess from a personal perspective related to kind of civic engagement and how it's defined, right? I think, in the context of technovation and what have you, I think it's really about providing youth the ability to say, this is a challenge, I see it, and I have ideas, and I've gotten with my community to source, like, we can best solve this problem. And I think the way in which we're looking from a metric standpoint, we do ask young people that have been involved in our program if they continue to solve problems in their community or, however they define it, after Technovation. And so we are asking alumni that regularly. And so we are getting that feedback that they are still engaged. And then we're also seeing it kind of in their career paths and the choices that they're making kind of post, Technovation. So I do think that I think a lot of young people would credit kind of their experience in Technovation to kind of finding their path and their passion and how they want to basically engage in solving a solution. And I think that's what makes us very unique, right? It's putting coding and technology and putting that problem solving specifically at real world application that helps folks find that pathway.
Thanks, Luella.
Thanks. Just jumping in real quickly. I know we have a few minutes left. It's asking young people what is it that they want to be able to see change, or what is it they want to be able to amplify, right? Within their specific community, within their specific school, and then, really co-creating with them, right? Like how they can go about taking action on that, right? That's research, that's YPAR. It's all of those things, but it's also, what I see at MICFA, like we measure civic behavior, we measure civic attitude. And that is what we do on every single survey for all of our participants. And we see that 90% of our participants that go through MICFA do feel more civically engaged to be able to go out and vote or even take action on their community issue. And it was funny that we're on this panel and I talk about bringing our young people into the spaces. I got a message from my young people, Bernard, and he said, James, I wrote myself this letter my freshman year for my civic action project around the court system. And now, like, we're like doing all of these things with Tony Preckwinkle and working on Safety and Justice Council. And I did it, bro. He was like, I did it, right? Like, I actually didn't only think about a civic project, right? But I took action on it when I was actually able to come to MICFA. So this is a full circle moment from him from his freshman year to the beginning of his senior year. And I thought that I should just uplift that because that's something that we can't measure, but that's something that is really his story and it's coming directly from him based off of his lived experience. And I value that. So
Yeah, no, thank you all. That was amazing. And I think for me, it's, are we just the way we talk about agency and identity in STEM programs, for example, right? Like, can we basically have a measure for that in sort of the civic engagement spaces? Do young people feel like they can actually have some agency and make a change in the world around them and try and tackle the issues they see rather than feeling despairing about it and really feeling like I can actually impact the world around me and make it better than how I'm finding it? And I think there are measures, and if there are researchers on this call, let's talk, because I think that there's room to really develop a robust sort of documentation and assessment framework for those kinds of things. So I know there was one question which I'm going to sneak in very, very quickly, James, because I think it came up a lot, was the issue of payment to young people, and whether you pay your youth council members and sort of how that funding works. I think specifically in Chicago, the question was whether it's coming through MICVA or through After School Matters.
So it's not coming through After School Matters. It comes through MICFA, and we also had an opportunity to work with the Department of Family Support Services, and it's called CYSE, which will fund your young people and kind of give you those hourly kind of wages of 1680. So that's a local resource we have here through the city, right? That you can apply, right? And it's pretty much like a workforce development, and then they'll fund you for being able to kind of like support. I will say that we did lose that funding this year just because there were some cutbacks on it. So that's more so of a MICFA tab and some other ways that we kind of piece that together. But ASM does do it, and the Department of Family Support Services does do it. A lot of people don't want to cover mentorship. Like a lot of people don't want to cover stipends or even hourly rates for young people. But we got to change that. So yeah, that's the information.
That's great. Thank you. And yeah, and one of the things we do at the Afterschool Alliance certainly is we pay stipends to young people for all the different ways that we engage with them whenever possible. And as much as possible, I'll just say I write it into the grant proposals I write, that I have an explicit line item that just sort of says this much is what we're budgeting for sort of youth stipends and youth gift cards, all those kinds of things. So different ways to think about doing that. And yes, not easy always, and especially not if you're doing it at scale for substantial amounts of money. We're at just a minute, so I'm just going to end by having you go to the next slide and reminding people about this new report that we've released, which, as I said at the beginning, has all these amazing people featured. Nuria was a co-author on this report, and Technovation and MICVA are featured in this report. There's a civic engagement toolkit. You'll find that and more on our CS website project. Somebody was asking about the funding database that is also on the project's website, and you'll find it there, and you can search by various terms that suit your program. And we have some messaging tips as well. Luella was talking about Technovation providing messaging tips. We have that around STEM and civic engagement as well. So please do check it out. Drop us a line if you're interested to learn more about our effort. As I said, we're not in the business of running programs. You heard from two amazing programs that are doing fabulous work. We just want to shine a light on what is already going on and try and seed more collaborations. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Sean. Next slide. Yeah.
It's just a reminder that we are hosting a Lights On After School 101 webinar Thursday, September 4th. So if you want some ideas on how to host a Lights On After School event and involve youth, feel free to join us. Be at 2 p.m. Great.
Well, thanks everybody. Thank you for your interest and your energy, and hope to see you hope that we can feature you all next time on this program when we do a next webinar on civic engagement and after school programs.